Hello, everyone. Thank you guys all for coming. I hope you're warm and comfortable and you're ready to brainstorm some ideas today and listen to our panel of experts. So my name is Jana Toby and I attend Macaulay Honors College. I actually graduated from Fort Hamilton in 2018, so it's nice to be back. And so just to jump right into it, first I want to say that the forum is actually being live streamed, so you see the camera over there, so we can share it with the school leaders and anyone that couldn't make it tonight, so we can spread the message. And introductions always go first. So I want to just say our co-chair of the evening is Iris Muley, who's the chair of Senior Issues, Housing, Health, and Welfare Committee, and our amazing district manager, Josephine Beckman. And a huge shout out goes to our co-sponsors of the event, State Senator Andrew Gennardis and Councilman Member Justin Brennan. And we actually have some representatives, if you guys would like to come speak. From Senator Gennardis' office, we have Maya Alfonte, and from Councilman Brennan's office, we have Jackie Denohue. I hope yes. So do you guys want to come up and speak? Both of you? Okay. Moving. Okay. So I want to thank our representatives, of course, and CB team board members that are here tonight, student and faculty leadership from our local middle school and high school. So we have Fort Hamilton, of course, and Fontbonne Hall Academy today. And of course, our expert panel. From NYU Health, we have Dr. Larissa. From NYC Smoke-Free Partnership, we have Julia. And New York City Department of Health, we have Ashala. And New York City Department of Education, we have Sean McLean, but I don't see him just yet. So before we begin tonight, why are we even here? We should probably begin there. So in Bay Ridge, Dyker Heights, and Fort Hamilton, more and more teens are vaping, and of course we probably see that. It's not a surprise. They're walking along local streets and in our classrooms, and that's probably not the best thing to have. So we know that many of our teens experience lung illnesses and lung injuries, and the CDC, FDA, state and local health departments are investigating these injuries. So just a little bit of information of what we've done as a community board. I'm just going to read it straight from our meetings. So the Department of Education leaders in School District 20 held a large meeting last spring to discuss the growing problem, and we continue to do so today. Community Board 10 had speakers attend the June 2019 meeting of the Community Board 10, which actually had the superintendent, Karina Constantino and Sean McLean come in. And our board members in attendance expressed a willingness to help organize an education effort right here in Community Board 10. So we want to educate our kids why they shouldn't be vaping, not just tell them, don't vape, right? Because that doesn't always work. Wednesday, June 19, 2019, the Community School District 20 middle schools attended Escape the Vape to share the message that vaping is just as dangerous as smoking. It's not a better alternative. And lastly, our communities invited all stakeholders here tonight to help further organize this messaging and education effort, because it is a community effort. And tonight, CB10 with our State Senator Andrew Gennardis and Council Member Justin Brennan invited a panel of health experts and education leaders with representatives, and of course, our amazing student leaders from middle school and high schools of public and private schools, so we have a variety, to listen to the panel and start the conversation, and then brainstorm ways we can expand this message to peers. So what will happen is after our presentations, we're going to open the floor to any questions, and then we're going to brainstorm, and our goal is to come up with 3 possible next steps. Do we want to go an education route? Do we want to have maybe some assemblies? Do we want to have advertisements? So we'll talk about that later. So to begin tonight, we have NYU, our doctor, speaking about everything.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to pull up my slides and then take you through them, if I can. Let's see. Okay. So my name is Larissa Leskowski. I am an emergency room doctor. I'm also a medical toxicologist. So basically that I trained at the New York City Poison Control Center and specialize. This is one of my areas of expertise. And I'm also from Staten Island, New York, which many of you are aware, although the rest of the city is probably forgetting about my borough, but spent a lot of time in Bay Ridge too when I was a young person. And so, you know, Before I get into what I was asked to speak about today, which is the risks of vaping, I wanted to ask you guys some questions. So the first one is, raise your hands if you know, if you feel like you know a lot at this point about vaping. Okay. And raise your hand if you feel like you know very little to close to nothing, and that's part of the reason why you're here. Okay, so we do have limited time. I'm very happy to answer anyone's questions in fine detail. I'm going to go through some of the basics, but really try and get to the heart of the risks. And in doing so, I just wanted to let you guys know that virtually all the slides I'm going to be presenting are slides that we present in classrooms throughout New York City to middle and high school students. So, in the past few years, as a toxicologist, I've been developing this program where we mobilize our doctors and future doctors into schools to do drug education. And so, just to get into a little bit about nicotine, vaping, and Juul, which is the reason why, unfortunately, we are here, and also just to let you guys know that our mission through this program that I've developed called the Prevention and Education Partnership is to keep New York City youth, to keep young people safe, healthy, and out of my emergency department. It's not to tell young people what to do with their bodies, it's to inform them in a way that I think will keep them safe and healthy. And so I won't have to take care of any of you at any point. Okay, so let's talk about the risks of vaping. So if anyone could just tell me, just volunteer what you know or think you know are some of the major risks of vaping as far as you've heard or learned. Anything you can, yes.
It's highly addictive and damages the lungs.
Highly addictive, very much so. We're going to talk about that, and that's one of the more serious risks. And then that it can damage the lungs, another one that's more serious. In fact, that probably encompasses the majority of the risks that are associated. So thank you very much for your answer. Does anyone have any other thoughts in terms of the risks of vaping as far as you've heard about in the news? Yes.
People think that it is safe to do that instead of smoking, just to take them away from smoking. But actually, medically, it almost has the same effect like smoking.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. And in fact, believe it or not, many in the medical community for a decent amount of time thought as well that these products were at least safer than regular traditional cigarettes. And I think that we're coming to shift our understanding and saying that the risks may be different, but in fact, in some cases, even more harmful. And I think that the reason why we're all here today is because of that perception on the part of many young people that what's the big deal? This is harmless, and I kind of enjoy it, and nicotine feels good as a drug, and everyone's doing it. So that layer of it's harmless is one of the biggest things that we need to overcome as a group that cares. Yes?
Part of the other issue is the fact that it comes in all these different flavors, which are very appealing and sexy to these kids.
Yeah.
That they can have, it tastes good and all that.
Yeah, who does not want to inhale creme brulee at 12 o'clock in the afternoon? I mean, sounds great to me. Yeah. Okay, so let's just talk in more fine detail about the risk. And to start, we have to understand a little bit about the basics of what are in Juul pods and what is in e-liquid. So the first thing that I'll say is many, but not all, e-liquids or vape juice contain nicotine. And we're going to get into those risks. And you mentioned one of the most important ones, which is addiction. But I want to talk about a few of the others. There are four main components in e-liquid or vape juice. And so one of them is flavor additives, which thank you so much for mentioning. These flavor chemicals were designed to be ingested. Okay, right? They were designed to make the Skittles taste like all the colors of the rainbow, right? They were never designed to be inhaled into your lungs. And they were never tested that way. And we're finding more and more that these flavor chemicals break down in the bottle, in the Juul pod, in ways that we still don't understand, and that some of them can be extremely damaging to the lungs. At least we're seeing that with animal studies, and we're starting to see that with people as well. So that's the flavor additives. There are two other things, propylene glycol or PG and vegetable glycerin or VG, and these things are there basically to give that vape cloud that people are after, and they stabilize the nicotine and the other chemicals that are there. But there are increasing concerns about some of the breakdown products of these chemicals. Certainly we know with 100% certainty that they break down to form formaldehyde. We don't know if the amount of formaldehyde that is formed is going to lead to cancer, but we know with, again, a pretty significant degree of certainty that formaldehyde is a cancer-causing chemical or carcinogen. So unfortunately, we're not going to know for a while because it takes many years for cancer to develop, but that's just one of the concerns that we have. I could go into the myriad of others, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to gloss over them. And then nicotine. So let's talk a little bit about nicotine. So many of you may know this, many of you may not. You know, nicotine, how it works in the body, it goes into it affects your brain, and it really affects all parts of your body. You actually have what are called nicotine receptors in your body, okay? So it has this effect where it both stimulates and relaxes the body. It's one of the reasons why people use it and they enjoy it. But one of the things that is a big problem, especially when it comes to teen vaping and vaping nicotine, is that we know that it has pretty significant negative effects on the developing brain in ways that it doesn't actually have that same negative impact on a fully developed adult brain. We're seeing that maybe there's associations between nicotine use in teenage years and certain mental illnesses, including things like ADHD. Certainly there's an impact on addiction for other substances. And so those are just some of our concerns with regard to the specific impact on a young person's brain. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but your brain is developing up until the age of 25. Maybe for some of us even longer. The other thing that's really gets to the heart of what you mentioned about nicotine addiction is that not all drugs do this. I want to be clear, but some of them, and the ones that do this, affect what's called the dopamine reward pathway, make a drug highly addictive. So I'm sure that many of you guys have heard of this term dopamine. Does anyone can think of an example of something that might stimulate dopamine? Sex, absolutely. It's a pleasurable experience for many of us, and yes, it can increase dopamine. What else? Yes?
A lot of times compliments and
Sure.
things like that.
Sure. I mean, yes.
Marijuana?
Yes. One thing I want to say specifically about marijuana, it doesn't affect the dopamine reward pathway in the same way that nicotine, cocaine, opioids do, but certainly it's among some of these things that people get pleasure from, where dopamine is released. And it's a little bit simplified what I'm saying, but the take-home point is nicotine and other substances cause a massive release of dopamine. We're not talking about the little bit that gets released when someone gives you a compliment, or you get an A on a test, or you eat a delicious meal. We're talking about massive releases of dopamine that cause the body, without you being able to have full control over it, to just want more and crave more of a substance or a drug. Certainly, certain activities like gambling and maybe even sex can get to that extreme, but for now, we'll just skip over that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about addiction and the addiction pathway, because I think that one of the ways for people to combat addiction within themselves is to start to recognize some of the early changes that happen in your body that are along the pathway to addiction. So, I would say that there's tolerance and dependence, and we can talk a little bit about withdrawal. So does anyone know what it means to be tolerant to a drug? Become tolerant. Yes?
Need more to get the same effect.
Exactly. So you start using, maybe you start vaping, you start smoking, and you get some effect. Maybe even in the beginning, it's not pleasurable. It almost makes you feel a little bit unwell. And then all of a sudden, you need a little bit more to get that same effect that you got. A lot of people can relate when it comes to things like caffeine or even something like alcohol, right? You build a tolerance once you start using it more, where you need more in order to get that same effect. What about dependence? Yes? Yes. Okay. So not only do you need it now to get through the day, but you need it to feel normal. Okay, you need it just to feel normal. So imagine that, before, you start your day, you have to, vape a bunch or smoke a cigarette, or, for people that are addicted to alcohol, have to, have 2 beers just to feel normal. Okay, that's what drug dependence is. And then when it comes to withdrawal, does anyone know what that might look like or what that is? Yes.
When you don't take them, what your body is used to,
Yes.
there will be some effects in the body,
Right.
the withdrawal.
Exactly. So once you've become so dependent on it and you're using a substance regularly, then when you don't have access to that substance, your body feels sick. So people that are going through, does anyone know what nicotine withdrawal looks like? Maybe some people in the room have experienced it personally, what those feelings could be like. Mood swings, changes in appetite, difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping, being more irritable. And I think that for many people that are using these products already, they're struggling with it in a way that they don't even know how to grapple with it. Maybe some people aren't even aware that they're experiencing it. Maybe going through a whole school day where you don't have access to your vape product or Juul is affecting your ability to perform at school because of these underlying withdrawal symptoms. Okay, I want to tell a story about a case that was called into the Poison Center that my colleagues helped to take care of. This is a 14-year-old. He was on the soccer team, and he came into the ER with complaints of chest pain, and he was having trouble breathing, and he felt like he had a fever. And he had actually already gone to an urgent care center and they performed a chest X-ray, and they said that it looked like he had a pneumonia. So he came in, and they told him to come to the ER, and he came, and so they admitted him to the hospital. They thought he could have pneumonia. They started him on antibiotics, and slowly, through the course of the time he was there, he got sicker and sicker. Every day he was having more trouble breathing. He was not oxygenating his blood. He was getting more agitated, because you can imagine what it might feel like to not have access to oxygen. And within the 4th day that he was there, he actually needed to be transferred to the ICU, to be put on a breathing machine, and he was on that breathing machine for over 2 weeks. He then spent another month in a rehab hospital and has not been back to school since. And this was someone who we found out later had been using Juul and also had been vaping with THC cartridges. So you guys may have heard a little bit about vaping-associated lung injury. This is something that's new. This is something that we've never seen before, and we started to see it as early as September, maybe even August of this year, but probably many of us as doctors weren't even aware of it, and now everyone is aware of it. And basically what we're seeing is, just like that 15-year-old, people are getting very, very sick, mostly healthy people, a lot of young people, and we're finding that not only are they vaping THC, but some of them are vaping nicotine alone. And like I said, they're getting really, really sick, and there have been a number of deaths. And that is something that frightens me as a doctor. Just a few other risks that we're starting to come to understand, but again, it'll take time to prove that vaping truly does cause these. Increases in asthma, increases perhaps in the likelihood that people that use vape products every day have heart attacks and even strokes. And these are some serious things that we thought maybe a few years ago that if we could get people to stop smoking regular cigarettes, then we would protect them from these things. But in fact, we're seeing that that's not the case. And then I mentioned that vape smoke also contains cancer-causing chemicals. Formaldehyde is just one of them. So there's lots of questions about what the other risks are, and it'll take some time for us to finally learn about them. And I apologize, I think I went pretty far over. But just want to mention this, and maybe some of my colleagues on the panel will also mention that there are some resources out there to help people that do want to quit. This is Quitting is just one app or text service that Truth Campaign has launched. my program has an Instagram account at NYC It's geared toward young people. I would encourage you guys to, follow us and maybe learn some things about not only vaping but other drugs and sexual health and just about having good, maintaining mental health. I'm going to defer the questions for the end, and I want to thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you so much for that. Next, we have NYC Smoke Free Partnership. Julia?
Sure.
Hi, everyone. Is it okay if I stay put? I don't have a formal presentation. But my name is Julia Cuthbertson, and I do community engagement in Brooklyn for NYC Smoke Free. We are a program of public health solutions, and we're funded by the State Bureau of Tobacco Control. So there's people like me actually in every county in New York State. One half of our work is in community engagement, and the other half of our work is in youth engagement. And we have various initiative areas. We work on smoke-free housing. We work on creating policies with buildings of all types to go smoke-free. We work on tobacco-free outdoor space as well with employers and faith-based initiatives. We also work on the retail space, and a lot of that is youth-oriented. And we work on smoke-free media as well. And so it's actually my colleague named Edric Robinson who heads our youth engagement work. But of course, vaping has occupied a lot of that space. We know that in New York State, we have 44% of high schoolers have tried Juul or some other form of e-cigarette, and 1 in 6 middle schoolers. So that is terribly alarming. We know that the Surgeon General says that this is a true epidemic. And what we're doing about it is, well, one half of our work, as I said, is youth engagement. And so Edric actually goes into schools around Brooklyn and engages with students and helps them become their own health advocates, because we know that students often like to listen to each other more than they like listening to adults telling them what to do. And so this really empowers them. And we bring them along to visits with us to elected officials, or we also educate them on the matter. We've also teamed up with American Heart, American Lung, and American Cancer Societies to educate also our elected officials. We work with faith-based groups to talk about vaping and flavors and the dangers of flavors especially. And you probably heard that, that the New York City Council passed a flavor ban recently, and actually on Monday, Mayor de Blasio is going to sign that bill, which is very exciting. And so that was one of our main concerns, was flavors in all forms. And so that's a big relief, but of course retailers have around a year, I think, to get rid of their stockpile. So we still have to do a lot of education around that. And we also, one of our big advocates is PAVE, Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes. Has anyone heard of this group? They've only been around actually less than a year. And I would also point, if there are parents in the room, point you to their website. And they have a parent toolkit actually on their website that's extremely helpful, I think. And they're devoted 100% just to vaping and e-cigarettes, so they've been able to develop some resources that actually go beyond what we do. And of course, I think we'll talk more about this, but the reason of also why vaping is so dangerous is we know it's highly addictive, right? And in Juul and other e-cigarette pods, you have the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes in that one pod when it comes to the amount of nicotine, but you don't have any way of knowing sort of when you've smoked the equivalent of a cigarette, right? So we hear stories of students who are actually smoking an entire pod in a day. That's like smoking an entire pack of cigarettes in a day. So it's no wonder that we're seeing teens who feel the need to vape continuously because they have become addicted, right? And nicotine is some believe to be as addictive as heroin. So this is really strong stuff. And so we're working to, it's kind of like Big Tobacco 2.0. So we thought that we had kind of already had a handle on this. We see cigarette rates going way down, and we see the opposite with vaping going way up. So we're trying to sort of prevent youth from smoking conventional cigarettes or vaping at all. And I think I will pass the mic as well.
Yes, you can. So,
Yeah, so hi, I'm Achla. I'm actually a physician as well, but I'm also the Director of Tobacco Policy and Programs at the Health Department. I'm also going to just pull up some slides. I think Larissa already talked a lot about some of the risks of these products. So I was just going to share some local data and kind of put that in context and maybe talk a little bit about policy as well. So taking a step back and looking historically, if we look at how much high school students have smoked in New York City, we can see that that's dropped a lot over the last 20 years. So there's been more than a 70% decline in how much students are smoking. In 2017, only 5% of high school students reported smoking in the last month. But now, if we start looking at other tobacco products, we are seeing that now there are close to the level of smoking. There's use of smokeless tobacco products and cigars and cigarillos. And then if you look at e-cigarettes or vapes, that was at 17.3% in 2017, so more than 3 times as high as the smoking rate. And kind of looking back and comparing 2001 to 2017, if you look at all the different products together, in 2001, 19.2% of high school students said that they were using one of these products in the last month. And in 2017, that was up to 21.4%. So this is really sort of threatening all the progress that we've made in terms of smoking. And more recently, we also have middle school data. So actually 6.7% of middle school students, this was from 2018, reported using an e-cigarette in the last month in New York City. But you can also see that it was much higher in 7th and 8th grade compared to 6th grade. So it seems like middle school students might be starting to pick that up around 7th or 8th grade. And you can also see that same pattern. It's much more common than smoking. And I think Larissa talked about some of the basics about e-cigarettes, but one thing that I wanted to point out is that the ingredients in these products are not closely regulated. So no one is making sure that what companies say in their products is what is actually in their products. And that even applies to the nicotine content. So no one is testing that product to make sure that how much nicotine they say is in it is what is actually in it. And I think that's really concerning and alarming. And there's also no threshold. So there's no requirement about how much nicotine manufacturers can potentially put in the product. So if you look at something like Juul, so this is what I think a lot of older e-liquids used to look like, come in more like bottles like this, and this has a nicotine concentration of 6 milligrams per mil. And if you look at Juul, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen, but feel free to come up and look at this afterwards in case you haven't. Like people have mentioned, one Juul pod, so one of these little pods, has 59 milligrams per mil of nicotine. And that's actually 3 times as high as is permitted in the UK or the EU. So we have higher nicotine concentrations that are being permitted here than anywhere else, which might be one of the reasons we're seeing so much more use potentially among young people than in other countries, because manufacturers are using these high concentrations and they're hooking a lot of youth onto their products. I think I'll leave it at that and leave the rest for questions, but feel free to ask questions about policy and local policy as well.
Yeah. So there's supposed to be one more speaker, but we don't have. Thank you. But he's not here today, so I'm going to open the panel for discussion. Open the floor for discussion or questions. Yes.
I was just wondering if it's okay if we can pass that around to someone else who are not familiar. Yeah, so this is actually the whole device, and this is the pod, isn't it? So feel free to.
So I have a question, and I guess maybe it could be directed to the Department of Health. As district manager of the community board, I'm always interested in learning about regulations. So we're starting to see an awful lot of vape stores and local convenience stores who sell products. Are there limitations to the sale to minors? Is the Department of Health or our legislators in New York City looking at even changing some of the nicotine even requirements? You mentioned a comparison to what regulations are in countries outside of the United States. Because it seems like there's more and more of these types of stores that are opening up, and what are the protections to the general public as consumers, certainly, and to young people?
Sure. So in 2013 and 2014, e-cigarettes were added to the Smoke-Free Air Act, and they were included in Tobacco 21 when that was passed. So technically, since then, the age limit was 21 and older to purchase the products, but there wasn't actually a license required to sell e-cigarettes, so there wasn't a good way to monitor that and like do inspections of stores because we didn't know exactly where they were being sold. So there was a license that was created and that went into effect last year. And that license was actually also capped by neighborhood, by community district. So whatever the total number of licenses was in a community district when those licenses were issued, the cap was set at 50% of that. So if there were 100, the cap would be 50. So just over time, if it falls to 49, then only licenses would be available and there would only be one license available. So that's where it is right now. So when the license went into effect, there were over 2,900 e-cigarette retailers in New York City. Now that's fallen a little bit, and we're a little over 2,600.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Well, the vaping was originally created in order to treat people who are addicted to smoking. They cannot quit. So if vaping is also dangerous, so what is the solution?
So there are smoking cessation medications. So there are 7 medications that have been approved by the FDA to help people quit smoking. So those are nicotine replacement medications like the nicotine patch and gum and lozenges. But there's also pills like Chantix and bupropion. So there are good options out there. And all of those medications actually had to go through clinical trials where they showed that they really helped people quit smoking. And no e-cigarette has actually, done that yet. No specific product has gone through that FDA process here. So the ones that have shown to be the best, so Chantix does very well, but actually nicotine replacement therapy can work similarly if you use combination. So if you use the patch and one of the other types together, that gives you a similar efficacy.
Any other questions?
I could just add to that. I'm the director of the Bay Ridge Counseling Center. And we have psychiatrists, nurse practitioners that will prescribe these, plus someone can see a therapist so that while they're going through this withdrawal process, they can get support around it, but they also can learn other mechanisms, breathing mechanisms, different things for relaxation as they're going through this process. So, and I know we're not unique in that. Other clinics would offer that service as well.
I think that's a really good point. It's also been shown that all of those medications work better with counseling than by themselves. And also, if you're seeing somebody like that, they can help you titrate those medications or change them if things aren't working for you, and really tailor medications to your life and your routine.
I feel like I've heard conflicting research on secondhand vape. So there's a lot of talk about secondhand smoke and you have young kids that can't be around secondhand smoke. Where's the research in terms of inhaling, staying next to someone who's vaping, how dangerous that is?
Feel free to add to this too. The same chemicals that we were talking about that are released when you vape, those are also in that aerosol, the secondhand aerosol as well, that people are exposed to. So those chemicals like formaldehyde, like nicotine, and because these liquids aren't really highly regulated, there can be lots of different chemicals potentially there. All of those chemicals are in that aerosol too. Like we were saying, we don't really even know we don't know yet a lot about the health risks of vaping in general. So I feel like we know even less about secondhand, but the fact that there are those dangerous chemicals there, I think is concerning regardless.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Yeah.
I have a comment. At the end of last May, District 20 had a fantastic program at McKinley Junior High. It was at the end of May, and it was sponsored by Senator Ganatis, Council Member Brannan, as well as the superintendent. It was just really great, but I felt, unfortunately, it wasn't well attended because it was too late in the season and the parents were getting ready, as well as the students, for the end of the school year. But I was in shock when I realized how terrible and how dangerous vaping was. I felt like I knew it all. But actually, I know nothing about vaping and how serious and how detrimental it is to the health of the people who use it. And I feel in the schools, I don't think the students are getting, my feelings, are getting enough information about how dangerous. For me, I thought vaping was just a way to curtail smoking, when in fact smoking is better than vaping. And I mean, maybe not, but whatever. I just felt it was too late in the season, and I think we're behind in getting the word out.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we didn't realize, how big of an issue this was going to become. And
In various schools, and nothing against their schools, but I don't think they're getting enough information. But that's mine.
That's why we're here, so we can put that information out there. You have one more question, too.
I kind of had a comment to build off of that. I think, the biggest issue is kids don't really know the long-term effects, and they're not really told by their teachers or advisors what vaping really does to you. But on top of that, I think it's also that it's too easy for kids to get nowadays, and it makes it that much bigger of a problem. And then furthermore, it's not a punishable offense in school for kids to be found with vaping. It's really just a phone call home, and the fact that there's nothing deterring kids from taking a pull from their friends or trying it and being afraid of getting caught. There's no consequence at the end to kind of deter them from that. I think that's kind of the biggest issue that we tackle.
I have a question for
You, since you're our boots on the ground, because we get this question all the time, is how are teens vaping so much if legally they can't get access? And so I've been told that some stores just sell it to you. They don't ask for ID. There was also a loopholes online at one point. What is your experience or your friend's experience with how easy it is to get?
So as a student that goes to a public school in America, vaping being a big issue, I see it all the time in hallways and locker rooms. To my understanding, kids get it from delis that are willing to sell it, or 20 people above the age of 21 that get access and then resell it up and raise up the price to make a profit.
Actually, I do have an experience of a teenager buying one. I was at a deli buying a water bottle, and they asked for a stick or a jewel, which is the same thing, and the seller was telling them not to tell anyone. And they were teenagers, they look teenagers, and they said if they tell anyone or if he gets caught, then he knows who they are, and they won't tell anyone.
Yeah. A couple of months I don't like to hear that, but it is true. I mean, I notice, I see that there is an increase. I think that's something in the number of stores that look to sell, a lot of more convenience stores, and it doesn't seem to me, I see a lot of young people in stores like that, and I don't know, it's very difficult to enforce, so clearly the product is out there, which is why I believe that education is really going to be a key component, and maybe we'll talk about that in the next segment. That'll become the discussion and how we can get that word out and what the best ways to do that are. I'm just curious, I wanted to ask our physician from NYU, locally here, I don't know if you work out of the Sunset Park location, emergency room, or if you happen to know anecdotally, what happens in an emergency room when a young person comes? Is there, in addition to treating them, but do you have the ability to speak to the parents and educate them with materials when they're in a hospital setting?
Yeah, I think that anytime. I actually don't work at the Brooklyn campus personally, but many of my colleagues do. And I think that what we try to do from the emergency department and the emergency room is anytime someone comes into the hospital, whether they got unfortunately hit by a car or drank too much, or certainly with these cases of younger people getting sick from vaping, we try to use it as a teachable moment and as an opportunity. And so we do as much education as we can, although from my perspective, it's even still too late at that point, which is why, but you know what, it gives a lot of my colleagues a very unique perspective to say, if you saw what I saw, then you would wear your seatbelt in the back of yellow cabs every single time, because even going 2 blocks, you can hit your face on that plexiglass and really, really mess up your face, okay? Like I've seen too many of that. If you saw what I saw, you would never take your eye off the knife when you were cutting your vegetables and your fruits, right? If you saw what I saw, you would never vape. You would never vape. You wouldn't even try it, because you don't know if you may be that person that becomes addicted with a substance that is, like mentioned before, one of the most addictive substances on the planet. And there's not enough time in the hospital setting as well, which is why, again, I agree with you that I think that we need to educate as many people as we can. I think that we need to be understanding to all of the reasons why people vape in the first place. If you thought that something was harmless and it made you feel a little bit stimulated and a little bit relaxed when you're dealing with the pressures of getting good grades and, doing well with all of your extracurricular activities and being stressed out about all the things that are on social media, then it seems totally understandable and reasonable why our young people would be looking to something like this, because it's having effects on their brain and their mental state. So I think understanding where they're coming from, understanding that many of us as adults have struggled with nicotine addiction and or alcohol addiction, and I think coming from that place, I think is important, because then I think that it allows a younger person to say, okay, well, at least you maybe understand where I'm coming from, and then you build a sense of trust. And so, I am a parent, but of a 3-year-old, so I haven't had to deal with this yet. And so if there's any parents in the room, I don't know how to talk to your teenager about this. And as teenagers, I don't know how you feel your parents should talk to you, but I think that the more that we engage in honest conversations with each other in a judgment-free place, we'll be all better off.
Yeah. So going over what you said, personally with my experience, I don't think the attraction to the stress relief is what attracts kids to want to start. I think that's what hooks them onto it. But I think it's the idea of, I'm 16 years old, I'm 17 years old, I smoked this for a year, be cool in front of my friends. Right. That's what kind of gets them to take it from the beginning. So if we could really stress the idea of how serious the consequences are, like earlier you mentioned the cancer-causing things that are inside the body, people really don't know the effects of. That would scare a student into not trying it. And then on top of that, the fact that I mentioned earlier that if you get caught vaping in school, it's not a punishable offense. You get a phone call home and that's it. It's not suspendable. It's not any needs for detention or anything along those lines. So, yeah, public schools is no. But, yeah, so I think if we add more consequences for kids that are smoking now and also educate them on how serious it is.
You should be a spokesperson. Yeah, bring some confidence in the kids that also feel like they have to do that to be a part of a certain group. I think that's a really big thing, especially because in high school, and even I want to even add college into this mix too, because some of us are still children going into college too. There's this need to kind of want to be in, and if you don't have an inner confidence, you can't say no, even if you know the effects, but it's kind of I have to do this if you really don't. Maybe that should be a part of it. Yeah.
I'd like to reiterate what this young man said about getting caught smoking. I'm very active in a few of our neighborhood schools, and I've had the occasion to talk to principals, and what the rule now is nothing happens if you're caught vaping in school. Maybe they'll call your parent. Maybe. You're not even suspended. Maybe they'll keep you out of class. to the end of the day, but absolutely nothing happens. I have grandchildren who go to private school also, so I'm comparing private and public. They are vaping in private schools, nothing is happening.
But
So
in private
nothing-
schools, they can do whatever they want.
So if nothing happens, then they don't think it's serious.
I would propose, and I think Jackie will probably be on board with me, that we could do a joint letter from the senator and the councilman to Chancellor Carranza requesting that he changes the chancellor's regs. I mean, I think that's the easiest way that we can go about that, because until the chancellor's regs are changed, it's going to be non-punishable.
Yeah, so it's non-punishable, they don't think it's fair.
Well, I would love it to be a teaching moment, an education moment.
But there's got to be fear too.
Right, fear. That's infuse.
Yeah.
But that could be a good starting point to infuse a education.
Yeah, so we'll do that.
So actually, I guess we're dipping into our conversation now, our discussion about what we should do and our brainstorming. So I'm going to keep it very open in general. What are the next steps, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah.
You know what I think you have to do is, like, for example, when I watch television and I see that one woman they always have on that died from lung cancer, it looks like, oh my God, horrible. I haven't smoked in years, but I get scared by that. I think if the kids in the school saw photos of people who have been affected by vaping or have students who have done it and been sick, come and speak to them. And then it's their peers, you know, they're seeing it. I think that would have a massive effect. I think it would instill in them something that she really shouldn't be doing.
Which goes to the doctor's point, which is if you'd seen what she'd seen.
Right, exactly. But to just be talking, somebody talks about it, and you know, yeah, in one ear and out the other. You know, that's really, you know, how it is. So I think that's what's needed, quite frankly.
To comment on that, we did do something in Fort Hamilton last year. We had a cohort represented presentations in every social studies class. We had a presentation on vaping and the effects. So I think that was effective, not necessarily. I think it could have been better. It could have been a multi-day presentation. It could have been a little lengthened out. It could have been more photos. I think it was the visual aspect of it is definitely key in deterring students from vaping. And I would even argue at private schools, it's even more abundant than it is at public schools, just because of access to money and the access to buying those the vapes and getting them in large quantities to resell. So I think that's the way to deter private school students, because you can't control the private schools. It's at their own discretion what the punishment is for vaping. So it's more, I think it's more about education, like Ms. Beckman said. I think that's the key part of it. Because deterring is simply one part in punishment, but the other part is education. I think that's the part that really matters, and especially something citywide, because that private schools is a big portion of the education in New York City in general.
So maybe also getting an expert to come into those classes, not just the students, because the students should also be listening. So getting
Or
you guys
assembly.
back here. Yeah, or in assembly, having it maybe during your monthly, or like each semester you guys have maybe, yes.
Is there any legal difference between smoking and vaping?
Legal difference?
Yes. In other words, there are lots of bans on smoking everywhere. If we could somehow
Yeah, and actually everywhere that smoking is not permitted in the city, like under the Smoke Free Air Act, vaping is also not permitted.
Okay,
But
so
I
I
think
shouldn't see people smoking on the subway.
no.
Vaping on the subway.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't. And I think part of it is like, especially things like Juul that are really small and discreet. I mean, part of the reason that people stop smoking to some extent is because it became denormalized and you didn't smoke inside restaurants anymore, you didn't smoke inside bars. So, that's something that will take time, but, definitely keep that in mind, that people shouldn't be vaping in the park, they shouldn't be vaping on the train, and things like that as well. One thing I was going to add in terms of enforcement earlier, I know some people said they've seen like delis or things like that, where products are being sold to people under 21. That is something that you can also report or file a complaint about online, and then that store may get additional follow-up inspections. So it's worth doing if you have time.
Suggestions, comments, or thoughts?
do this, but I think that one of the things that has to be done is on the company level. I mean, Juul is a big growing company, and I'm sure there are a couple other big companies as well. They take out co-pay payments in the New York Times, trying to convince everyone that they have public interest in heart. And it's not unlike what the tobacco companies did for so many years with their advertising. And they knew. We know that now. But I think it's just, I don't know how we can impact on that level, but that's the level. It's kind of like with the opioid addiction and the Sackler family. And they knew, and they advertised, and they pushed, and they pushed. And it's only after the deaths of so many, many people that people are recognizing that they were just scum and responsible for the deaths of so many people. And we see this being repeated now, and I think there has to be a war against the Juul company and other vaping companies. Someone should just go and try to take care of it.
One of the things that I would say is, unfortunately, I think that Juul is never going to, where there's profit, right? There's the opportunity for profit. I don't necessarily see them self-regulating. At least they've been in a state of denial for the way that they've played a role in convincing young people that Juul is cool.
Exactly, but Purdue Pharma also didn't self-regulate.
Yeah.
And it took a long time for the country to get wise to them.
Sure.
So we have a jump start. I don't think that it's in our power, but I think that that's where a lot of it lies.
I think that one of the things that might be in the power of some of the young people in the room is to try and figure out how to make Juul not cool, right? Because it's still cool, and it will be cool for a while. So how do you convince your peers that vaping and juuling is not cool? For, like you mentioned, we were all teenagers at one point, shaping our identity and trying to decide who we were and who we were to the world. And we had, we didn't have to do it with a camera and photos constantly being taken of us on social media. It's much harder for you, and we appreciate that. So because you're living it right now, what might be a way to transform this vaping is cool to it's no longer cool? And that's one of the ways that the Truth Campaign and others made cigarettes not cool, right? I'm sure that if you see someone in your class smoking a cigarette, you kind of think a certain way, right? That it smells, it's a little bit dirty, and that is a result of years of efforts to convince people that cigarettes were no longer cool. So that's, I think, one way that we can try and take down Juul, which I've been, and I'm sure you guys too, have been on a Juul takedown, for the past 3 or 4 years. The other thing I want to ask our young people is, again, a lot of people argue that education isn't enough. And as someone who is trying to educate people, I take that personally, and I think that it is important to educate. Now, one of the things that we learned from smoking is that young people said that maybe telling them that smoking causes cancer wasn't enough to deter them, but telling them that they would have bad breath, yellow teeth, and bad skin with wrinkles was something that maybe was more effective with the message. So I wonder what you guys think would be, of the many real risks, what types of things do you think would resonate among your peers that would deter them from using? Yes?
I would agree with that notion of appearance, because appearance is very important to teens. I think that's, even though people, you hear, oh, it's going to give you cancer, it's not really, they think, oh, it's never going to happen to me. But that, if it runs in your family, you actually have a higher chance of it happening to you. And a big thing is when you see pictures of the long-term effects on your outside appearance, that really resonates with you, saying, if I do this, what am I going to look like in X amount of years? Or what is this going to do to me in X amount of years? And then when you realize that's going to happen, then that's really the motivation of, I have to stop this before it gets to me.
And I also, you just reminded me, I actually knew a young fellow in high school, and he's on the basketball team, and he smoked a lot. And I remember he went on, like, he decided he wanted to cleanse himself. So he's like, John, I'm not going to smoke anymore because I don't feel fit. I don't feel like I can run as fast as I used to run. And I don't know where I've seen it before, but they actually had this thing where they had like athletes come in, run, and all of the students run too, and the kids that were smoking really couldn't keep up, and it kind of affects them. So like, I know like for musicians, they also can't play as well anymore because they literally don't have the capacity to do so. So fun things like that where it's like, oh, maybe I should cut down some smoking because I can't seem to do what I normally do.
We just did an event at St. Francis College in downtown Brooklyn, and there's an app that we used. You take a photo of yourself, and it will tell you it'll age you according to how many years you smoked, and so you can see sort of the rough effects that it'll have. And it actually was a huge hit. I mean, it was mainly most entertaining, but it was actually really alarming. One idea also is, big tobacco and big vape, which is basically one and the same. They've been using predatory practices now for decades and targeting teens. And so it's no accident, that young people are vaping. And so it's important also to know that there's no shame in it and that it's not really your fault because they've been pumping billions of dollars into getting you to try and then get hooked to their products. And when you look at sort of a large picture, sometimes it resonates with young people that they've been played basically by these big corporations. And sometimes that bothers people enough to say, I don't want to be one of their, I don't want to be a pawn in their big scheme. And so that's, one angle that some advocates like to take, but I don't know if that really resonates with young people enough for it to be as, have any effect.
So what do we think, students? Ideas, thoughts, comments?
So I definitely think the long-term consequences, and bringing that up does deter kids, as you said, the fact they would give people wrinkles, teeth, that's scary to kids nowadays, as everyone's looking for a good appearance and to keep up with that. But I would like to disagree with what one of my colleagues said, saying the cancer is really the biggest scare to that. When I heard cancer earlier before, I've obviously heard in conversations about chewing e-cigarettes before, but when I heard it during your presentation, that really pulled the heartstrings. I think the threat, because nowadays we all understand how threatening cancer is and how serious that disease is. So really using that in presentations more often, and when you talk to kids and when we have these presentations for them, and bringing that up, you really do the most in deterring them from trying it.
So do you think if schools were to have, conversations or required conversations about the negative effects of vaping, or a campaign or contest or some type of activity?
How many you can lose so much weight by so much time?
Do you think that would impact young people in school? In high school?
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, can I interrupt? 100%. Definitely more conversations, always more positive. If you look around the room right now, no disrespect to anybody here, but I think the people that actually need to be hearing this are the students that are about to try their first vape or middle schoolers.
Well, that's why we have an intimate group now and we want to expand.
Yes.
We are the first to expand, or actually,
Yeah, I just wanted to jump onto the bandwagon that you had said, is that, these anti-smoking TV commercials, they're not done by the tobacco company because they feel like, it's something they want to do. I believe that's part of the settlement of the big lawsuits against the tobacco companies.
Right.
They had to do it as part of the I'm going to say, trillion-dollar lawsuits. It's not because they want to, it's because they had to.
Right.
So until we start having people who are, a large number of people who are dying from vaping or are severely disabled, and until they start class action lawsuits, you're not going to see, primetime television commercials against vaping. It's just not going to happen because that costs millions of dollars for each commercial.
So, and that goes back to they're making money, they're going to keep going with it, yes.
Yeah, I want to bring up, because maybe some of us will not remember or weren't born yet. 1966 was the year that warnings were put on packages of cigarettes. It was a tremendously difficult problem, feat, because the lobbying of the tobacco companies was tremendous. all the major companies. Matter of fact, many of them today have diversified into food products as a making, but they're still making biscuits, making cigarettes. And it basically was a political thing. It basically had to get Congress and the Senate to go against the tobacco companies. And the warnings were, and every time the warnings would be made stronger, it was a fight. The first one used to say, this may be harmful to your health. That's not enough to scare anybody from anything. And then they started talking about pregnancy, lung cancer, high blood pressure. They started breaking it down. But this is a very, very long-going process. And I think basically, if we're talking about vaping for younger people, we just define it as a national health problem, and you regulate it the way you're regulating other things that are awful. You know, if there was a little asbestos in this room, we couldn't be in this room. So there are ways of preventing things, but it's going to take a lot of legislation. I read recently in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago that there's some foot dragging about hurting the Juul company because they pay a lot of taxes.
Right.
And they're a good customer. They're good for the economy. The product isn't good, but they're good for the economy. So, I mean, even on this panel, if we had maybe next time a judge or somebody from the city that can talk about these things, because it's really all legal. And I'm sorry taking too long, but you also, when you talk about the younger people, well, they're kind of in control of their parents. And even when they go to college, you have what you call local parents. You know, the college has a guardianship. But you have adults doing the same thing. I see adults smoking cigarettes all day. Sometimes I'm in Manhattan, I'm walking by certain high schools. I see high school teachers taking breaks to smoke. Smoking has not been eradicated.
Do what I say, not what I do, they say, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what they say. I'm just saying that the message is there, but there are still people who are doing it, and they're not just starting to do it. They were born after the laws were passed, after the regulations were passed. So that's what I'm saying. It's more of a national problem.
So what I'm hearing a lot from everyone is we want legislation. So we have that as one of our things. The next thing is also assemblies or maybe conversations. That's what I heard our students say. We have one comment. Yes.
So just to go back to that idea of education, I agree that assemblies and health officials giving information, facts, that's important. I believe vaping is a part of the high school health curriculum.
It should be, yeah.
And I'm not just, it's also part of the middle school health. Is there a middle school health curriculum? Okay. But so in addition to those, our school has started to incorporate into the biology curriculum. I know it's not a requirement, and I don't know that we want to start trying to go that route, but just to make it available. So they're doing a lab actually this week in our biology classes in conjunction with Cornell. Cornell is sending a bunch of equipment, and they're going to create like a simulated vape with some sort of, not bacteria, I don't know what it's called, I'm not a science person, tetrahymin, I think, is the name of the, so it's going to be like in a petri dish, and they're going to vape, and these living organisms are going to die as a result of that. So like, I don't know if there's other places naturally in the curriculum that can be done, or if there's money available to continue to get those types of lessons in front of younger people. I think that might be very powerful for a middle school student to see something like that. If we know that in 9th, 10th, 11th grade they've already kind of made that, they've had that first exposure.
I think the first thing is it has to be a punishable offense in school, regardless of the fact that it's not a law.
I will just say that as someone who works in a school, it's very hard to catch kids doing it. If you're in a bathroom, if you're in a place where, girls, I've even been told that can hide under a desk and do it, and the vape disappears quickly enough that an adult doesn't notice it.
Speaking as someone who years ago smoked in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't leave a smell. It doesn't leave a smell. There's no cigarette butt.
Yes,
you know.
and I remember like sitting in the classroom where there were kids in the back. Literally, it takes 2 seconds. You do this and it's gone. Nobody knows. So it's actually harder.
Really?
Yeah.
We have very hard performances.
No, there can't be any kids cameras, so
You're not allowed to
it is
have
hard.
cameras.
You really have to, the only way you can really catch is like if the kids are sitting in the library and you're like standing over there and they don't notice, you're
To walk
looking.
in when they're doing
But yeah, so
Or
I'm
someone
writing,
grabs them out.
I'm writing on the board, that's it, you guys are done. I turn around, that's it, it's gone. I didn't know what you guys were doing.
So there's no smell.
It's gone.
No smell.
So that,
That's gone.
when District
Yeah.
20, I know there, I guess something happened, they're not here, but when he spoke to the community board, they spoke about how difficult it is because this product doesn't emit an odor. So that a lot of kids, not only smoking the flavored tobaccos, but they're also smoking, illicit substances. And unlike smoking a marijuana joint or a cigarette, there's immediate odor attached. That does add to the complexity of it. So today, our effort as a community board, our hope was to begin this conversation and really, as we're doing now, is brainstorming ideas of how we can be helpful. We have some resources. Our elected officials have additional resources to reach out to the leaders, principals, staff, homeschool associations, PTAs within the schools to really begin a district-wide campaign. I'm just, we want to know what are the best ways to do that? What would be things that you think would be the most effective? If you were to see a banner on, say, a street pole, that's like a new way of advertising. Advertising to get people hooked and ways to, these dual companies do it. What are ways to combat that? Do you think it's materials? Everyone's on social media today. That's not really my generation, that's your generation. What's going to work in your generation?
In my opinion, I think that we should have an assembly and have someone that is experienced or has seen what has been happening to people that have been vaping or doing the e-cigarette, come and talk to kids and just tell them like what are the consequences. Because the consequences scare most of the children, and maybe people think that they're too cool to stop or like, oh whatever, you guys should follow me. But once they know what the actual consequences are, then they might go back to it.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to add on that. I feel like assemblies are not intimate enough to get to reach with the students, because I know personally from when I went to assemblies, even though there would be a serious topic behind the assembly itself, most times if you have a group of friends, especially when they're sitting right next to each other in the assembly, they'll care to disregard whatever's being said within said assembly and continue to mess around and stuff like that. And I would propose doing it with it, having someone come in, an informed representative to talk about the problems and show these pictures of harm and stuff, and have it inside classrooms, because at least with the classroom, it's a more concentrated area of students, and you would get to them a little bit better than the assembly. That's all.
I think that's a great idea to cross it over into other areas of the curriculum, like you were saying in the science lab, because it makes it so tangible, almost for the older generation when Oprah brought out that wagon of fat. Yeah, it's oh wow, it stays in your head, and if it's you're being hit with it in an assembly and in your science lab, a representative, and preemptively in middle school, I think that would be helpful.
Do they still have health class? Is that still a thing?
It's a half credit.
Because I don't know, because I'm much older. But, in health class, addressing it, but I think they should have, I don't know, everybody's, on Instagram, I'm on Instagram, but, they should have an Instagram campaign even, where they have Jewel is not cool, whatever, and get it out to all through social media, because I think these kids, I think you guys are all, right? I'm on social media all the time, and I'm much older than you. So, if they're always on social media, they do it that way, that's how the kids respond. They're receptive to that. So, I think that's a good way to hit them hard with some graphic photos, maybe, and some other things to...
That's going to be you. You have a comment?
I wanted to say that I'm so grateful for everyone's comments. What was just recently said, I do agree. Having done assemblies and classroom-based talks before, I think the benefit of assembly is you get in there, you talk to a bunch of people, and it's just one person that is there to do it. But the benefit of being in a classroom is that perhaps you're more effective, even if it does take more people to do it. and more resources. I also agree with social media, because this is where kids and adults live these days. And so I would encourage you guys to think about creative ways to get on social media. And, we do have an Instagram account, and I'm sure our other panel members have Instagram accounts. And I think that, promoting and circulating that sort of positive health messaging is valuable. And I do want to just shamelessly promote the program that I have, and I want to say, we have some flyers. I would encourage you guys, if you want something like this, if you think that this would make a difference. I am biased, but convinced also that this would make a difference, and would encourage you to, put in a request for someone from my program to come to your school. Now, I can't promise that we would be able to do that, unfortunately, because our resources are so limited. I mean, all of our resources are limited, and we're doing everything that we can. And so, in fact, I would say I shouldn't, our program shouldn't be the only one that you reach out to. You should reach out to some of, NYC Smoke-Free, right? We probably have educational program that you can offer too. So, reaching out to advocate to try to get this in your school, I think would be valuable. If I can show the people that I work for that 20 schools just requested for us to be in South Brooklyn and Bay Ridge and Becker Heights to give these talks, then that allows me to then say to someone who's got a lot of money, hey, I have something that, the demand is there, we need to get out there as much as possible. And speak to as many people as possible. So that would be my thing that I would encourage you guys to do while you're continuing to try to find, other resources and getting them into your school. Yes?
It's got to be multifaceted. You've got to hit many, many different areas. Education, social media, whatever. But let me also suggest, and somebody mentioned it a few months ago, I just latched onto it. Natural gas doesn't have any odor, okay? The gas companies were forced by Congress to put an odor into the gas so that you'll smell it when it leaks. We can do the same thing with vaping.
Actually, I have a question for some of the students. We have elected officials in our district who are supportive of everything we're talking about here, but the vape lobby has, like Joel, for example, has a person who in New York who specializes in lobbying elected officials who might be more sympathetic to their cause. Do you guys think it would be effective if you guys had a message for those folks and were able to access the folks who are either sympathetic or even supportive of companies like Juul? Do you think it would be effective for you guys to talk to those folks and say, we need your help too to get more, to get stricter laws passed or, to get more regulations? Do you think that would be effective or?
Absolutely. Conversation always opens up room for change and discussion, and I think that's the best way to tackle this issue. And if there is a conversation to be had of any of the issues today, this is the most important one because it's directly affecting the youth. So, yeah, that would definitely help.
And we educate our elected officials as part of our work every year, usually December through March. And so I formally invite anyone who's here who would like to join us. We go to Albany on February 4th this year for a full day of back-to-back meetings. We also do in-district meetings if you can't, because that's obviously from the school to come with us. But we do that for several months out of every year, and we love to have young people because their ears perk up when they see young people in the room. Your future voters, they really want to know what you have to say and what's on your minds, and so we really love having your support.
That's a great experience.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of add on to what you said about the popularity and it being kind of cool. Like, I don't know who we can lobby, but like celebrities and like, I don't know the celebrities, but like, I think people who have a platform on Instagram, like if I have 75 followers, like no one's gonna care if I say that Jules is not cool, but like people who really have attention of young people, if they made it a cause, I think that I don't know how to lobby a celebrity, but it's gonna be tough.
But possible. There's a lot of people on like YouTube, but I thought YouTube automatically because it's easier to reach out to them. So far what I hear, I'm going to summarize so we know where we are. We want more discussion in classrooms, having experts come in, sending out messages to you guys, having you guys speak and show a lot of visuals. What would happen to you if you continue to smoke or vape? The other thing that I really liked, I like the lab thing because I remember also seeing once this video of this woman had like the lungs, and then what, I think it was cotton balls, and then they kept putting smoke in the video. Did anyone see that?
I saw something like that.
Yeah, and then they kept putting smoke, and you see all of a sudden these cotton balls are like super black, and that's what basically happens on your body when you do that. So visuals, and then social media, jumping on there and maybe getting some of the more influential people on Instagram, push through that, and also maybe competitions, kind of like writing competitions, like maybe for middle schoolers, like if you do this, you get 5 points extra credit. All of a sudden, a lot of kids are writing about why this is bad, and then maybe sending them to some of our local officials, writing a letter. And of course, the biggest thing is the legislation, which is a little harder to pass. So that probably needs more discussion, yes.
I think you should add to that.
Yes.
My neighbor had mentioned the Chancellor, Carranza, and I think we should include him because really, while I don't think students should be punished if they're caught vaping, I think something should happen.
Oh, I think they should be punished. I have two teenagers, I definitely think they should be punished.
So, but that has to come down from the Chancellor, because right now he's not into any type of punishment.
So what are the punishments we're talking
Well,
about?
I don't know.
I would think it would be the same punishment as if you smoke a cigarette. It's just adding, it would just be adding it on to whatever the clause is in the Chancellor's reg. I don't even know, I honestly don't even know what it is.
Something to look
The Chancellor's regulations have different levels.
We have an answer.
There are certain things
In
that
terms
are.
of smoking, it's actually the same clause right now in the discipline code as smoking.
So it's all in there.
It is in there, but I don't know what the punishment is.
You have to put higher levels.
We have to get caught.
We have the level of punishments like vary for different parts of the code, so that's something that could be.
Because there are 5 levels, and so wherever smoking is, it would have to move up to the next level if you want to be able to enforce other punishments.
So it's not at the punishment level yet?
You're limited in what you can do.
Okay.
Almost getting caught also, these things, there's no smell.
Yes.
And what comes with punishment is also enforcement. So like you mentioned before, it's very hard to enforce it. And I know that schools I have cousins in other schools that they enforce nicotine detectors in bathrooms and just going to school in general.
Yeah.
Although that is a costly solution, it is a solution to preventing things in school, period.
Yeah, I had a meeting with the gentleman who invented the vape detector device, who's been working closely with Sean from District 20, and we actually have a bill in front of the City Council requesting that they require vape detectors in all bathrooms in middle and high schools. Where that lands, we don't know, but it is an interesting but expensive option. But yeah, I mean, if they legislate it, then it has to be paid for, right? So it's tricky, and the technology is constantly changing. It's hard to find them. It's hard to. But listen, if there is enforcement, then when you do get caught, it gets enforced. So it's not impossible to find. It's not impossible to smell. It's just not as easy as other things.
It just.
Yeah, it allows for it to continue.
Kids don't take it like seriously. They're like, oh, this is a big deal. It would be a punishable offense, or there would be like some way to detect it.
Do you know when we would decide on that?
Whenever it comes up. I don't know.
Possibly years?
Hopefully not.
Okay. And yes.
So the fact that there have been recently sudden deaths because of this, it seems to me that it's almost like playing Russian roulette vaping. I mean, if I were a person who was vaping, because of me, my personality, having heard that stuff, I would stop. That would scare me enough. I mean, cancer is scary, but cancer is 20 years away maybe, or 40 years away. But sudden death of an able-bodied person, young person, is extraordinarily alarming. So I'm wondering, first I wonder if all the kids who are vaping know about that. And I'm wondering if there could be more, if that could be played up more. I don't know if you need permission from the families or whatever it is, you know. But, I mean, that's just, you know, big.
So students, do you guys know that? Yes.
I think playing up also that the batteries are extremely defective in these vapes and they can catch fire at any moment. And I think painting the picture of you can be sleeping and that will be charging right next to you and that can catch on fire.
But could that hurt?
Very, very dangerous.
Is there examples of?
Yeah, there have been a couple of deaths.
It's like a cell phone. Two cell phones next to your bed and their batteries are defective.
Or would you remove your phone from your room charging?
What?
Would you remove your phone charging in your room if you knew it was gonna? Well, even right now, like there are some phones that do it. Has anyone removed their phone? It's hard. It's hard, right? But did anyone with the Samsung remove your phone, or did you just think, oh, that's my phone? Something.
I think
it was, yeah.
Right.
There was.
I think a very, very good video, aside from, in addition to everything else, very short but excellent video presentation that could be shown, you know, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, so people don't lose their interest. To get pictures and stats, of course, very easily.
Can I ask again, each of you guys, like, have you heard of these deaths that have occurred or this vaping-associated lung injury? So raise your hand if you have heard about it before. And what is the conversation that you think your peers are having around, like, do you think that, because from our perspective, this is one of the most frightening things. I mean, I can tell you that the lesson that I've offered has changed not dramatically, but from last year to this year. So I do think, I 100% agree with you that sort of case is something that should be prioritized. And in fact, when we go into the classroom, it's one of the first things that we start with, like a real case. We don't need patients' permission as long as we're not identifying who they are. So we can talk about cases that we've taken care of. And for a little while, we would talk about, I mean, before this 15-year-old, right, and many other 15-year-olds like that, we would talk about basically a toddler who found vape juice on the coffee table that was left open by his aunt, and he drank it as toddlers do. They just put things in their mouth and they drink things they don't know. And within a short period of time, that child started seizing. They brought the child to the emergency department, and unfortunately, the child died. And that was impactful. And at the time, it was the closest thing to, you know, the cases that come into the emergency department. There have been cases, like you said, of explosions. They're fewer, right? And so we try to be really thoughtful about not just scaring people without being responsibly educating and just throwing things out there that may not actually happen. The overwhelming majority of young people that are using a Juul are not going to have it explode in their face, right? It's something that you should know about. However, I agree with you. You know, what's happened in the past few months has totally transformed the landscape. I think that for people to take home that it's just THC vape cartridges that are causing this, while maybe many of them, the overwhelming majority, are causing these deaths and very, very severe cases. I mean, there are a handful of young people who, again, have reported, I only vape nicotine or I only Juul, and this is what happened to me. 2-3 weeks in an ICU, barely, like struggling to stay alive, and some of them are not surviving. And to me, that is the most frightening and unbelievable thing. The 15-year-old I mentioned, he's otherwise healthy kid, right? He plays soccer and maybe just does this one thing, thinking again that it's harmless. And it is like Russian roulette, because there's no way of knowing who, because we don't know if it's related to how much people smoke or vape. We don't know like exactly which product, so there's a certain degree of risk that you're taking, and the risks and the consequences have become so much higher in just a span of a few months. So, you know, if you know anyone that is certainly vaping THC, please tell them to not do that anymore and to just do other things that are less harmful, maybe even just smoke regular marijuana.
please tell everyone you know that, you know, and at the same time, you know, I would say that if you're vaping, you should stop until we learn more about what's happening.
I want to tell you something interesting that you say that. My husband is a New York State certified medical marijuana user.
Sure. Yeah.
He has a card, the whole thing. He doesn't, he's been so for about 2 years. He doesn't use it and has not used it much. Right? I don't have to get into this whole situation. He has used it a few times, but the interesting thing is that they dispense it in an e-cigarette.
That's one of the reasons, yes.
And I don't know if they still do, or if they're going to change that, but it's interesting that you say that. Tell people specifically not to vape that, and that's how they dispense it.
Well, I mean,
Just mention it.
well, I will say one thing again. In states that have legalized recreation, in states that have legalized medical marijuana, and in states that have legalized recreational use, there is some degree of quality control, right? So when everyone started to think about and identify vitamin E acetate, I apologize for this medical terminology, but vitamin E acetate as one of the components that were in these THC vape cartridges potentially causing a lot of these illnesses and deaths, that, you know, New York State has a list of the approved components that you can put in a THC cartridge that can be sold in a medical marijuana dispensary, and vitamin E acetate is not one of them. Okay, there's some degree of quality control. Most of the people that have admitted to THC vaping have gotten it on the black market, which means that they didn't go into a dispensary to purchase it. However, some of them were under the impression that those were products that were coming from states that have legalized it, like California or Oregon, and the brand name is the same as what's actually sold in those dispensaries, but somewhere along the way, someone has bootlegged those. So one of the take-home messages that we also try to communicate is there's no quality control on the illegal drug market or anything that you purchase on the street. There's some degree of quality control when it comes to your husband or other people that are using medical marijuana going into a dispensary. But even still, I think that the jury is out on whether or not there are potentially other components in THC vape cartridges that may potentially prove harmful. And there is a very, very much less harmful alternative, and that's using medical marijuana that's not in that form.
We also have a student comment. Yeah.
I was going to add on to what you said before. I think even if you do tell a student to stop vaping, I think at least in my scenarios, at least for the kids that I know that vape, I think that the addiction has gotten so bad to the point where they're gonna keep gambling until they eventually strike out, and eventually they actually injure themselves, and they have to go and get medical attention. Because I know friends. I remember it was probably last week. I was walking into gym class, and he came in super high, and I had never seen him like this in a state like this before. Usually I do see him hit a vape and stuff like that, but it was that one day where it's a stereotypical stoner face, you know, he has no facial movement whatsoever, and his eyes are just in a gaze, and I don't know, he said he was gonna stop vaping a few days ago, but I guess he came in like that. And he even told me the next day he threw up inside of a locker because of the repercussions of what he did that day. And so yeah, I feel even though they do say they're gonna quit, the addiction is just too strong.
It's not, you know, I would encourage, one thing that you guys can do if you wanted to create a project at your school, you can get everyone in your grade or everyone in your school to talk to a grandparent that has smoked, right? Or a family member that has smoked that probably is still smoking or struggling with it, and just talk to them about what it's like to have a nicotine addiction. I mean, I see patients, I talked to some guy a couple of weeks ago who smoked crack cocaine, snorted heroin, and he quit those things, and he was like, are you kidding me? Those things were easy. I can't stop smoking, and I'm here, and I can't breathe right now, and I'm going to be admitted to the hospital because of my lungs and my breathing. I can't stop smoking, but
I mean, this is what nicotine addiction looks like. I think that if people appreciated that, because I think also when you're young, you feel invincible and you're like, I'll just try this. I'm not going to get addicted. I don't have an addicted personality, whatever that means. I mean, it's not an individual. These are drugs that affect part of your brain, and it doesn't have to do with one person, versus another. It's the drugs themselves. So, I mean, that's something that you could consider trying. And it sounds like that person that that friend, he needs help. You can't. There are apps, and I'm sure that there are other resources that are available to try to help him with it. It sounds like he's struggling to do it on his own.
And also maybe having them available. Like I don't know actually. Now that we bring it up, I don't know where I would send somebody. So like here, this is a resource.
We could have
Making
other conversations about having resources as far as putting that information together, and here locally at home, getting that to every school in the district, and that's maybe something we can all advocate with our elected officials. So we will wrap it up.
Okay, so one last comment.
And also, I know for friends that if I were to try to tell them that the script would be the consequence, or you shouldn't do it because maybe it might in the long term cause cancer, they'll oppose it and they'll find something off online, maybe they'll post statement and bring it on to oppose my opinion. And maybe I try to, reason out with them, like we shouldn't do this, and like how many deaths have been going on. They'll tell me that no, they already had a problem from before. That's the positive.
So misinformation. So again, with the experts. Okay. Last comment.
I was going to say maybe have a designated counselor in schools that deals with this kind of thing, and that with vaping and coping with that and building a plan to really get yourself off it. And as well, social worker, some sort of person to talk to, and that has a specialist on it, just to educate the student and help them create a plan to get off it. And also, I think maybe having a mandate of having schools required to talk about it, and have projects, and have some sort of education on it. Not just they bring it up once in a blue moon. It really has to be a maybe monthly topic, something that's brought up regularly, just to reinforce that idea that vaping is not something you should do. It's something that's going to really have detrimental effects on your body in the long term.
Sorry,
yes,
I was just going to say, I had a follow-up question for you guys. I know all of you said that you heard about the lung injury outbreak, but you're also the ones that are here. Like, is that something that you feel like everyone has heard about and was talking about, or like, do they know but not really care, or sort of how does that fall out?
I feel like people they hear about it, but they don't really care until they feel it happen to themselves. Like I know people if we had assemblies, they would just be like, okay, whatever, until they actually experience it themselves. Like most people who do it, they do it because of peer pressure and they see their friends doing it and they're not going to quit because their friends are doing it. And that's why I feel like if they hear it from an adult, they don't want to stop. Or the counselor thing, that's not as effective because they don't want to get in trouble or they don't want to feel like they're being judged.
Still having that resource. Yes.
Many teenagers hear about lung problems and stuff, and they come up with excuses as the person who died of a lung problem because of vaping. They'd be like, no, we had a lung problem before, and vaping is the problem. So.
But it's like that years ago when you were smoking just regular cigarettes and pot. It was like that. I'm not going to go into more dangerous drugs, or I'm not going to,
Definitely. So I'm sure we can continue to talk about this for hours. So the conclusion of this conversation is we have a lot of work to do, or continued work to do, and a lot of great stuff with the flyers and the images and the highlighting the deaths, and then maybe having the lab experiments, or maybe doing some physical activities, some social media work, maybe trying to get a counselor, looking at those detectors. So we have a lot more work. Thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to having another forum. Thank you.